Religion and harm minimisation. Today I have a few words to say to opponents of religion, particularly to those who embrace a more aggressive style of atheism. Now, many among you watching might think, well, that's me. But actually, it isn't. For example, when I talk about the Bible, it's never to go on about what rubbish it is. I just seek to interpret it correctly as an historical piece of literature. I don't hate it any more than I hate the Odyssey just because some of Odysseus's acts I consider to be morally reprehensible, and also some of the acts of the gods within the story. I don't hate the Bible just because some of the acts attributed to God or some of the biblical heroes I also find morally reprehensible. I read both of these as historical literature, not in order to judge them or to take moral lessons from them, but just to understand them. Sometimes I'll find something that strikes a chord with me in either of those books or any other book for that matter. But I don't regard either of these as especially inspired, nor do I regard these or any other books as the repository of all truth. But that doesn't mean that they contain no truth. I don't reject everything in the Bible. There's some useful stuff to be found there. And even the stuff that isn't useful or maybe morally questionable can still be interesting for what it reveals about the times and places, what it reveals about the minds and hearts of the people who live there. To atheists, I would say, rejecting everything that's in the Bible just because it's in the Bible is as irrational and non-critical as accepting everything that's in the Bible just because it's in the Bible. Neither of these positions is necessary or desirable. Although I see no reason to believe in God, in any God at all, or in anything supernatural for that matter, I don't consider it my mission to eradicate religion from the face of the planet. As much as we might find it irrational and unsupported by the evidence, I have no objection in principle to the idea that people believe in some kind of supernatural being. Many people obviously do. I think they're mistaken, but for the most part, those beliefs are pretty harmless. Just as believing that wearing some kind of cleansing crystal around my neck is harmless, or believing that I was once a cat in ancient Egypt, or that the Beatles were the greatest band of all time. Now, all of these beliefs are, I think, baseless, but they're generally harmless. Sure, if you dig deep enough into any kind of supernatural belief or superstition, you may uncover a worldview that's questionable or even harmful. But most people don't go there. They're happy to stay on the surface. For example, if someone enters a competition and crosses their fingers hoping they'll win, nothing is gained by challenging the underlying belief that somehow they can influence events in some sort of magical way, or what the implications of this might be for the way the world works, or how harmful this could be for the development of science, say, or how morally dubious it might be to seek such an unfair advantage. No one is seriously thinking in this way when they cross their fingers. They're just engaging in a harmless ritual behaviour that signals to them and to the world that they really want to do well. That's it. There's no more to it. Now, of course, there are all kinds of grades of religious and superstitious belief. Obsessive-compulsive behaviour, like having to flick a light switch on and off 10 times every time you enter a room, or having to go back 10 times to make sure you turn the iron off. This kind of obsessive behaviour is an extreme form of superstition, I think, and it can become quite debilitating. It's the same with religion. There's a long way from saying grace at a meal, which is really just a harmless way of expressing gratitude, not even necessarily to someone or something. It's just a general expression of thankfulness. There's a long way to go from this to flying planes into buildings or protesting outside abortion clinics. So, When it comes to religion, I would suggest that the best approach is the one often taken with respect to drug use. There will always be drugs in the world and people will always use them. Sometimes this can be quite harmless. Sometimes it can harm the person themselves and, by extension, their family and their friends. Sometimes it can harm society, as when someone begins to commit crimes to support their habit, or when it becomes a burden on the health system. But attacking all drug use is ineffective. Banning all drug use is ineffective. It will never work, and it may cause more problems than it solves. There will always be drugs and drug users. So the better approach is harm minimisation. Make drug use as safe for the user as possible. Minimise harm. I would suggest the same approach with respect to religion. Religion will always be with us in one form or another. It will come and go in waves and will frequently morph into something new. But there will always be religion and religious people. Most of this will be relatively harmless. What I hope we can do is to minimise any danger that it presents to individuals and to society. Perhaps we can wean people off the heroin of biblical literalism to the less harmful methadone of a more progressive form of belief. As you can tell, I'm no expert on drugs and drug treatments, and what I just said may have some people who work in that area rolling their eyes. I'm sorry about that. But I hope you get the point. Biblical literalism actually poses a serious threat to society, whereas relatively benign Anglicanism or Episcopalianism in general doesn't. Now, I'm not saying anything about the particular individuals who follow these particular religions. There are many predators in those groups, even in the moderate religions, as I'm sure we all know. But there are predators in photography clubs too, or stamp collecting clubs. But I would say that as a belief system, these more progressive, more moderate religions are more benign without sacrificing the benefits that many people find in religion. Indeed, they're significantly more beneficial because they allow the person to remain rational, to think for themselves. They don't bombard people with the fear of hellfire. They're more tolerant of difference and dissent. And of course, they generally don't try to turn society into Gilead. That's a Handmaid's Tale reference in case you happen to live in a cave. Now, I believe this is true of these more moderate, progressive expressions of religious faith, even though I think the worldview they embody is fundamentally flawed. So, just as I find it harmful and occasionally funny when religious people scream at me in the comments, foaming at the mouth, so I also find it harmful, maybe not funny, when people who describe themselves as atheists foam at the mouth at the mention of the Bible or at any expression of religious faith. In fact, I find this worse because, frankly, I don't expect rationality from fundamentalists, but I do expect it from atheists. Maybe I shouldn't? Anyway, I hope we can take a more nuanced approach to these issues rather than just lumping everyone in the same basket and screaming back and forth at each other across the internet.